Welcome to Life Change Solutions. I'm your host, Kendra Crompton, and today I am so excited to have our guest, Arielle Leavitt. Now, she doesn't know this, but if it weren't for her, I wouldn't be podcasting today. I used to follow her on a podcast she was doing out of her home. And then I got sick with COVID and I was just scrolling through and I was like, wow, she's really changed this podcast. It's looking awesome. So she has a podcast called The Connector. And we're going to talk a little bit about connections tonight and how important they are to our mental, emotional, physical, and social well-being. But before we get onto that, I want to introduce Arielle and tell a little bit about our backstory. So we have two friends, Matt and Jennifer. Shout out to Matt and Jennifer. Woo! Anyway, Matt and Jennifer are friends. And I had mentioned to them, like 2 years ago, I said, I kind of like to do a podcast, but I don't know the first thing about it. And they said, well, you have to meet our friend Arielle. And then we met at a dinner, but we never really connected after that. And then we went to their wedding and we totally connected. We shut the place down dancing. We had such a fun time. And then, like I said, I was scrolling through and I'm like, wow, this is an awesome podcast. And I look down at the bottom, it says Pod Populi. I click on it and here we are. So thank you, Arielle. So before we go on, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the podcasting business, and then how you changed it to The Connector.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. That was such a beautiful introduction. And I was like, oh, I'm loving this. Tell me more. I'm sitting here with the story and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great story.
It is a great story. And it's about connections. Because if I hadn't had that conversation with Matt and Jennifer, it's I love one of the things you said in one of your podcasts, one conversation can change your life. Mm-hmm. And I totally believe that because had I had not had that conversation with them, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah. And now we're here, we're getting to podcast together and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
So I think you said tell a little bit about yourself, right? So, I am a business owner. I've had my own business for 10 years. So entrepreneur, like to dabble in businesses, which is the best thing and so much fun. But so about 2 years ago, I was kind of I'm kind of ready to figure out something else to do too, because I love what I do, but I'm as an entrepreneur and a businesswoman, you're always kind of ooh, what's next? What's on the next horizon? So I have a good friend, her name is Kathy Heller, and she was offering a course called Made to Do This. And it's kind of figuring out your life's purpose of what you're made to do in this world and how to make your life's purpose a business. And so I was like, you know what? It's during COVID. I have some downtime with my business. It's still going, everything's great, but I'm why not take a course? It also, if anything, self-development, right? And I was just let's just do this. And part of her course, she started a podcast 6 years ago and it's blowing out of the water. And she was just everybody needs to have a podcast. And I was like, what in the heck really is, I know her podcast, whatever, but we all should be doing this. What is this? So, during her course, she figures out you figure out what podcast you want to have if you want to have one. And I decided to do it. And I was I'm going to interview couples that have beautiful, loving relationships because my parents have one. And I just love seeing how their relationship is. And I kind of always thought other people had relationships like this. And then I started realizing they don't as I started dating more. And I was wait, you're not communicating with me the way I'm communicating with you. And there's this lack that's happening. And what is this? Yeah. Yeah. And I'm what is this? So then, so I was all right, let's interview couples and show people that you can have these loving relationships where you're not talking negatively about your spouse at a dinner party behind their back or whatever it is. And let's show these amazing couples that are out there that have this. And what is this? How is this attainable?
I know. I listened to your podcast and I loved it. So I love that idea too, because I counsel, I'm a counselor and I've counseled couples. And it is interesting to see those relationships that do have that loving relationship and they just really build each other up. And then those that really don't.
Yeah. So I did that. And I realized after about a year of that, interviewing over 35 couples and experts and all these sorts of things, I just realized loving the other person for who they are and accepting them and appreciating them. Yeah. And that's really what it kind of comes down to. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other things too, but that I feel like is the main course, like it's a dinner plate. Main thing, because
it could be, right? It could be your main course. Definitely. Definitely your main course. Definitely. It should be your main course. It should be. Or at least dessert.
So then that led me into the next thing. And I was like, wow, well, like you're in business, right? So like when you're in business, if you just appreciate what that person's doing for you in business and I was networking and doing all these other things more, and I was connecting people, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take my podcast to the next level. We're going to go to You've Got Connections, because like connections are very important.
They are.
And so then I did that for about 6 months, interviewing business owners and their connections and how they got there. And then I came to Pod Populi, and I met Brian Howie, who is one of the owners. And he just was like, look, you connect people. You need to step into that. And you need to be the connector and own it. And that's when you saw that whole rebrand that happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it really does need to happen. And there's something to say, like when you step into your own power, right? Like your own skin, like, and own it. Because like at first I was like, wanted to push it off to everybody else. And I'm like, no, you're the connector. Like I'll just make this happen. But yeah, I'm doing it. Well, there's no shame in the game, right? Like, yeah. So, that's when I decided to take it on.
Well, and one of the things I've noticed you doing, and I'm going to put a little plug in for you, is she's doing a business board for women to support each other. And one of the things that I talk a lot about is support systems. Mm-hmm. So as a social worker, we look for those support systems that people have. And a lot of times we look to religion or we look to community. I love this boardroom idea because it connects women with women of like interest, and you have that support system. And that's so important when we look at the mental, emotional, and the social well-being. Yeah. But that also affects our physical well-being. Did you know that when women talk to women, that they have a chemical in their brain that lifts, that does not happen when you talk to men? Did you know that?
No.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh.
I know. We got to talk to more women, right?
I'm loving this.
I was thinking on my way here, I've only had women on my podcast, maybe for a reason. No, I have a couple guys that are going to be on my podcast, but so far it's just been women. But yeah, it raises a chemical in your brain, so you actually feel better. You feel good. And you notice that. Maybe you notice that with your interactions, that you actually feel better. Women need to connect with women. So I love that you're doing that.
Thank you for the plug, and just beautifully like saying what it is, because that's exactly what the boardroom is. Yeah. And I'm very, very excited, because it's just been, women need to have a board for their business. And
I think women do need women. I was mentioning to you before how one conversation can change your life. Mm-hmm. And within that board, you never know what conversation you're going to have. I just did a podcast with a friend who she decided to get outside her box, kind of like you. And she decided to go to water aerobics, which happened to be the class I was teaching. And afterward, it was the time I was going through my divorce, and I happened to mention it. And she said, well, I just went through a divorce. If you ever need to talk, and we just clicked, hit it off. That one conversation, she helped me through my divorce. We've been best friends ever since, and it's 7 years later.
Oh my gosh.
One conversation changed my life to have that support system, and hers too. Now she's going to be a licensed mental health clinical therapist, and I'm helping her get through her degree. So we have been a support system for each other. So you just never know. Well, I met a guy on the plane once, super good conversation. He was telling me about his daughter. We're going to connect to have her on the podcast. So you just never know how that one conversation can change your life. So I would love to hear if you've had those kinds of experiences, or people on your podcast where connections or one conversation has just changed their lives or changed your life.
Oh, many. I mean, I could even say like just some phrases or things that people have said that have changed my life and my way of thinking. Of course, I mean, for example, a couple of things, like when I've been in business for 8 years, and I heard this thing said, money is like blood in the body. It needs to keep moving. And I was like, oh, because if there's stagnation, then there's disease. And if there's stagnation with your money, it can't flow. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, of course. And, like, so things in different conversations, like there's sort of phrases, there's things. And when you hear those and then they resonate with you and it actually makes a energetic shift in your body, that's when that whole ripple effect happens.
Well, and it's like, causes a change. That causes a change in how you thought about money.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Then change your life, because boy, that can certainly change your life and how we think about finances and money.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My business after that has never been better.
Wow.
It's gone up. It's like insane. So many opportunities, so many things happened to me. It just like has really I felt the shift. And when you feel that shift, it's like this, like almost like a weight lifted off of your shoulders or something, some sort of like energetic shift. And when I felt that, I was just like, yep, this is it. This is happening. It's almost like when you throw like a stone into like a flat pond or something, like there's no ripples, there's no nothing. And then you like throw that little stone and then all of a sudden it just starts rippling. And that's kind of what happens when you get that aha from a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So that's how maybe this whole thing started with you, is hearing conversations, seeing these connections.
Well, one of my things is I just love connecting people to what they need, or it might even be a podcast. It might be somebody else's business. It might be the other person themselves. I just really enjoy connecting to them, like problem solve their thing. Like, what's going on with you? What do you need? Like when we're talking like podcasting, I was like, or whatever it is, I'm like, yes, you need this. Like, this is something that's important. Like, let's get you going with it. Like, because it's moving on, you may take an action. Yeah. You're keeping the energy moving, right? Like it's that energy flow. So there's no stagnation happening and you continue to grow and succeed and have these amazing experiences.
Well, there's a couple of things that you said, but one, you talked about life changes.
Yeah.
And that's my book. Mm-hmm. My book is Life Change Solutions. And moving forward instead of staying stagnant, or a lot of times people ruminate backwards. And when the other thing you said about how you connect people, you connected me without even knowing it to Pod Populi. So you are definitely like, it's somewhere in you. You are this connector. It's like in your blood, in your bones, in your genes. I don't know, but you have that ability to connect even when you don't know you're connecting. So that's awesome. Like I said, I'm so excited to have you, because honestly, had you not started your podcast, when you first started your podcast and I watched, I was like, there's no way I could do that. There's no way. Cause you were doing it all yourself. You had all this equipment. And I was like, okay, so I bought a mic and I bought a pop thing. And then I looked at how to edit and I was like, wow, she's good. I can't do this. So yeah, so then this all happened and it was just that.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's truly meant to be, because
and it was within months. So I got COVID in August. You had started here in August. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I happened to see your podcast. I was following you because what else was I going to do? I couldn't work. And so I'm like bored and I'm looking through and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I'm going to look up this company. And I called them and here we are.
It's the best. It's the best.
It is great. What about people that you've seen that you've had on your show that have maybe had experiences that maybe you could share something where they've had this kind of, or maybe it's with you. I don't know.
Connection or?
Yeah, this connection that's changed their life. Or the board. Maybe tell us a little bit about the board, how that's working.
Either or. I mean, one of my, I could talk about both of them because I love
go.
my favorite subjects. But one of them, one interview particularly really resonates in my head is Matt. He owns Fro Pro protein bars. They're amazing protein bars. I'm just going to shout out to him for a second because they're delicious. They're here in Boca and now he's all over the country. And he was just like an amazing human being for me because he was in recovery. He shares this whole thing on the podcast. So just
So you're not sharing any secrets.
No secrets, guys. But I'm just going to reshare his story because it's absolutely incredible. Where he was making he's in recovery. He got let go from his job. He had to figure out a way to make money, and he was like he's biking his way to some place or whatever. So then he was like out all day, and he's like, I'm hungry. I just don't have enough time to pack my food. And then I'm driving, and like, I don't have a cooler and this whole thing. He's like, so he started making these protein bars for himself out of peanut butter, and he'd throw some protein powder in it and just whatever, and then bake it. And they were okay and whatever. So one day he was teaching one of these guys, one of his students, and he's eating his bar, and his student's like, I want to try some. Like, let me try some. So he's like, here, I mean, it's kind of gross, but you can try it. It just keeps me full throughout the day. I was like, this is so good. And then the next person and the next person, they started sharing it. And then like people in the, that had like juice bars around here were like, Matt, like, I want your protein bars in I'm going to support you. You're an amazing person. Like, let me support you. And before he know it, now he has a national company. But it was amazing that talk about connection, right? Like that, his story just blows my mind to this day that he really, just was so grateful and coming from a place of like gratitude, even though he had a bike and do all these things and whatever it was, but he was grateful that people gave him this opportunity to put his protein bars in his business, to do all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, because as long as you live in gratitude, everything else just works itself out. Oh,
and I'm going to talk a lot about gratitude because we've done that before, but not on this show, because that's a whole nother topic. It's a whole nother topic. But what I loved is that you said he shared that one conversation with that one person who then supported him. And I talk a lot about support with connections, because as human beings, we are designed to connect. Mm-hmm. That is our basic human nature, is we are designed to connect. Mm-hmm. So if we're designed to connect, your role is so important, but we need those connections. A lot of times people will say to me, well, I don't need anyone. I can be by myself. I'm an introvert. Even introverts really need to connect. Mm-hmm. That's a basic need. We need to feel that connection. And I was just on another podcast today, and he was saying that he's not finding that connection through the social media. Everyone just wants to text. I think it's really important to actually connect physically. Have you found that as well?
100%. And actually, that's leading into the boardroom, is why I have the boardroom in person. I don't have it in Zoom, because in person, there's an energy. There's a feeling you get from everything. We are made of energy.
Yes.
And when you're actually with people, you can feel that. And over Zoom, it's wonderful. It's great. Like, especially during 2020 and all these other things. And even if you're traveling or we need to get in touch with somebody else, it's wonderful. I'm not putting it down at all, but there is a very different connection and a different elevation that happens in your own body.
Yes.
When you are with somebody, like having this conversation with you in person is so much like better than
it's energizing, right?
Yes.
So I love that you mentioned that, because we all have energy that we're having that energy back and forth right now. Mm-hmm. And yes, I, over the pandemic, did my mind body groups on Zoom because that's all we could do. There's a difference when we do those groups in person, and a difference in the sharing. Not that I still do them on Zoom, because there's people all over the world and I can't always get them in one place. But if I had my preference, it would be in person, because we feel the energy. Each one of us has light and energy. And you can feel negative energy from people too. So you want to be with those people that have that positive energy, that lift your spirits. And I think that's what the boardroom does. And that's what I want my listeners today to hear, how important it is to connect. That one conversation, that one connection can change your life and be a support system. And those places like the boardroom or church or just water aerobics. Those ladies in my water aerobics class, they are like a family. Mm-hmm. They look forward to, and they're talking. I have to say, okay, as long as you're talking, it's okay, but you got to work out too, And it's more important for them to just be there and connect. In fact, during the pandemic, I had to really push and say, listen, they can be 6 feet apart, but they need this social interaction. It's so important. And as we go through difficult times, because a lot of my book talks about hard times and how those connections, just like your guy who was in recovery, that's a really tough spot. I used to, my internship was in recovery. And for him, then he now has a purpose. And now he's got those connections and he's got that support system. And what we found in recovery is that those that really recover and stay in that recovery are those that have that support system, that have those connections. I think that's whatever we do, the death of a lost one, a loved one, you can either stay home and sulk, and I totally believe you've got to feel those feelings, but not set in them too long. And I probably say this in every podcast. It's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to be sad, but you have to then move forward. And the way we do that is connect. And I had someone on my podcast who lost her spouse. And what she said was she had to force herself to even go to the grocery store and connect with people. She would talk to people in the line. So
interesting.
Right? Yeah, just one conversation talking in line. Yeah. And just us having our conversation about the podcast, about, whatever. Or Matt and Jennifer having the conversation with me and saying, hey, Arielle does a podcast. You should talk to Arielle.
Yeah.
Change my life because here I am.
Oh, it's so much fun. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You touched on so many good points there. And I was just like, like I always say, connection is like we're taught we need water, shelter, food, like there's 5 basic things or whatever to survive. I always feel like connection is number 2, like water and then connection and then everything else.
So interesting you said that because our professor of mine said, what is the most important thing that humans need? Connection. Everybody threw out all this other stuff and he said connection is the number one thing.
Totally agree with him.
So you are the connector. Okay. So before we end today, is there, my podcast, I like to end on hope, health, and happiness. So through connections and inspire people. Can you, if you had one thing to tell people about connecting and how it has brought hope, health, and happiness either to you or someone else, can you give us an example or in your own life? Yeah, no, I always say like, sometimes just even chatting with somebody at the supermarket, like for 2 seconds, it's just a fun little thing. I'm actually going to share this story because I feel like this is just this happened to me this past week and it was just kind of a fun thing. Talk about life-changing things, whatever, but not even life-changing, but it was just a fun thing that I think as a society don't realize or what. So I was at Publix and I'm buying some groceries for the week and I go in the yogurt section and I'm almost done with my food shopping. And by the way, I'm dressed in like my yoga outfit, whatever it is, right? Like my athleisure. That's me all the time. I did not work out that day, but I wore my athleisure because it's my comfy clothes. Had my hair up in a ponytail, didn't have any makeup on. I was just like, I'm going to go into Publix, do my thing and then leave. And I went to go reach for the yogurts and this guy reached for the yogurts at the same time as me. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of funny. We both were like, oh, and we looked at each other and he's like, oh, this must be a really good yogurt. And I go, yeah, actually it's really good. It's like a brand. And so then I get my couple of yogurts that I needed. And as I'm pulling them off, he hands me a yogurt and is like, when you eat this, you'll think of me. What? I know. Okay, wait. So are we talking to elevate love dating thing? No. I'm talking about connection now. Right now it's all connection, but it was, it wasn't suggested. It was just cute. It was very friendly, very, and I was just like, oh, that's it left me with a cute, nice feeling. And that was it. Then he walked away. I did my thing. We didn't see each other again. No numbers were exchanged. Nothing else was done. But it was just like a spark of connection that just happened between us. And it left me in this little pep in my step. I was like, oh, this is so nice. And it was something like that, where it's not it wasn't sleazy. It wasn't done in a weird way or anything. And it was his delivery was very just jokey and just kind of light and fun. But things like that, it doesn't have to be obviously hitting on somebody at the supermarket or whatever, but just very nice, interactions when you have a sweet interaction with somebody, it just changes their elevation a little bit of that day. And to leave them in that little bit higher of an elevation is always a nice thing.
And
I love that. I love that because one of my missions is to lift spirits and lighten loads.
Yeah.
And even just that little thing, hey, you'll think of me, lifted your spirit. Like, oh,
it put a little chuckle in me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's really cute.
Hey, well, who knows? I want to follow up on this. If you meet him again and it connects, hey, you never know. You never know. I'm always trying to fix up people. So, you never know. Thank you so much for sharing that because that is a great example of how just a little connection can lift your spirits. Just going to the grocery store, especially if you're going through a hard time and you don't want to get out of the house, go to the grocery store in your athletic wear or whatever and talk to somebody.
And I could tell you, I was not like in looking in like the mood, like you want to approach me. I was just like, I'm doing my thing. Let me just do it. And then, but it just was nice to like, have like a nice little conversation that was from somebody and everything. And then, I don't know, I just was like smiling a little bit more the rest of the day and that was it. And then, it was a fun story to tell my friends. Yeah.
Well, I love that. I'd love to leave our listeners with that. If you are at the grocery store, maybe lift someone else's spirits because you don't know where they're at and you don't know what it will do. So, and you don't know what one conversation may do for somebody. It may change their day. It may change their life. It may change their week. Who knows? But that one conversation can change our lives. And I want to thank you, Arielle, for being on my show today, for being the connector, for helping me be here. You just were, like I said, connecting even though you didn't know it. So thank you very much. Now, how can our listeners get a hold of you if they'd like to on your podcast, obviously?
Yes. You can connect with me at on the podcast at oh my gosh, the connector with Arielle Leavitt. I also am very active on social media, Instagram preferably, Arielle.Leavitt, and stay connected with me more there and find out more about the boardroom, find about what's going on with the connector and the podcast and everything. Thank you so much for having me on. This was just like, I like loved it. I was like, what the whole time just flew by. It was just so easy to talk with you always. So thank you.
I'm so happy to have you because like I said, I wouldn't be here without you. So thank you very much. So you can reach Arielle on her podcast. Please subscribe. Please follow her on her podcast and you will not be disappointed. And then you can reach me on mylifechangesolutions.com or on my email. All of that will be in the notes. And you can get my book. Here's my book, everyone. You can get my book, which talks a little bit more in depth on connecting and a lot of different other areas and how to get us through change. You can find that book on Amazon and you look under my name or Life Change Solutions. It is also on Audible. If you purchase the book on Audible, I will send you a free copy because the book has things you can write in, but sometimes you don't have time to read. So if you purchase on Audible, you will get a free copy. Just let me know you purchased it on Audible.
That is brilliant. So, I just had to say, oh my gosh, I love that.
So that's yes, awesome. And you will get a free book today for being on my podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Because I'm like looking at it, I'm like, I need to be reading this. This is so good.
I will give you a copy and thank you. I want to thank our listeners. Again, I want to thank you all for listening, for leaving reviews, and for following me. I know it's a little tricky. I am putting on directions, and hopefully we can get it a little easier. But I know y'all have had a little bit of a hard time. Have your followers had a little hard time
subscribing?
Doing reviews. I think you probably have a younger following. Mine, I've had a lot of people saying, I don't know how to follow you. Do you give them tips how to do that?
I would say Apple podcast reviews are not the easiest to like do it. All right, Apple Podcasts, we've got to like figure that out a little bit. But like, you have to scroll down a little bit, do the 5 stars, then actually leave a comment and then come up with your own name. And it's not like Google reviews where it's a little bit easier, but it's, it maybe takes like, instead of like 5 minutes, maybe it takes like 7 minutes to do it.
So look on the bottom of the notes of my podcast and I left some directions on how to do that.
So sweet of you. Oh my gosh.
So, and again, thank you all. And this has been an episode of Life Change Solutions.